the IATF 16949 podcast, where we talk about all things automotive. Find us on our channel at youtube.com/IATF 16949 auditing, or visit our website at www.iatfglobaloversight.org. This is the IATF 16949 podcast.
So hello, welcome to this 7th edition of the IATF 16949 podcast. And again, I'm really pleased to be joined by Niall Keeley from SMMT and Devon Gage from IAOB. So hello, Niall, and hello, Devon.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Devon.
Hey, guys.
So let's start, I guess. The whole purpose of these podcasts is to talk about things that are going on within the world of standardization and things that are going on with IATF 16949, and also any feedback that we're getting from the SMMT IAOB YouTube channel. So now, if I can start off with a question to you, it seems from all the social media and things like LinkedIn that ISO have finally made the decision to start the update process for ISO 9001. Do you know any more news on that? And is that going to affect the revision timetable for IATF 16949?
Yeah, no, I saw the same news, Paul. As you know, the IATF outside. It's the IATF 16949 is a private standard, albeit based on ISO 9001. So IATF is sort of one step removed from the ISO organization. So like you, I kind of saw the news. I think after multiple votes, in a way, it seems to keep coming back to the surface, this question about when is the right time to update 9001. And yeah, like you, I saw that the decision had been made to move forward with an update. Again, not being involved, it's difficult to know exactly what the update will look like, how kind of significant it will be, or what the timings are. But I don't know, you know, like you kind of glean bits and pieces, and it sounds like maybe an update in 2025, 2026. But I don't have any further information. I do know, and Devon, James Bruin does sit as a liaison member, so he does have some understanding of what's happening within the ISO community, but not without not voting on anything.
Yeah. Okay. So no, thanks, Niall. That sort of reconfirmed my view then that IATF are not bound that if ISO changes that they automatically have to trigger the revision process in IATF. But maybe, that could be another reason that IATF would look to do an update in IATF 16949. And Devon, sorry, Niall. Yeah.
Well, no, you're right, Paul. Historically, before IATF became this sort of private standard, and with the ability to update the standard on its own timeline, let's say, historically it always been properly connected in with ISO 9001. So any change to 9001 would have forced a change to IATF 16949, or TS as it was then. We don't know what will happen, but it would be, I would guess, unusual for the ISO 9001 standard to change and the IATF standard to not change. But that's just me talking. I don't have any sort of insight, let's say, to what's happening at the IATF.
Yeah. And Devon, I think we mentioned in the last podcast that there is very early discussion in IATF about a possible revision in IATF 16949. In your view, what would be the purpose of any revision?
Yeah, so obviously the first thing we're going to work on is bringing those sanctioned interpretations into the standard itself. So you're not going to have two different reference documents. And then there's a whole bunch of areas that the IATF is looking at to see if it's within the scope or out of scope of the next revision. looking at possibly how the supply chain works and any new challenges with electrification or autonomous driving, as well as some good practices we found throughout COVID-19 that maybe help reduce our carbon footprint and make our standard more efficient. Yeah, it's really all up in the air right now, but those are just some of the key
Yeah.
topics that we're working on.
Yeah. So no, that's interesting. So I guess it's going to be watch this space. And as things unfold, we'll obviously keep you bang up to date through these podcasts. But it's interesting there, Devon. Obviously, COVID drove a lot of changes within the automotive industry. And Niall, I think this sort of leads me to the next question then. That obviously that we've got the IATF COVID response document, and that still shows as obviously current and available through the IATF website. During the COVID, obviously remote audits for IATF 16949 were allowed, both for internal audits and also for third-party audits. The question I guess some people might be asking, are remote audits still allowed?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And the answer is the COVID-19 response, the ITF response to COVID-19 is still an issued document that's available from the IATF Global Oversight website. It's I would say, a slimmed down version of how it started, as things have have changed over the course of the last few years. But yes, the COVID-19 response is still in effect. We do still see occasional third-party audits being conducted remotely. But again, the numbers are very, very small. And again, any third-party audits that are conducted remotely have to be justified beforehand.
Right. Okay. And one of the things, Devon, you may have seen that obviously one of the standards that is used a lot in the automotive supply chain, really driven by the German automotive manufacturers, is the process audit standard VDA 6.3. And I was interested to see that there has been some interesting guidance about remote audits, hybrid audits, and on-site audits. Can you explain that a little bit to the listeners?
Yeah, good point, Paul. So VDA 6.3 2023 includes a matrix which identifies criteria for assessing the risk level of justifying a remote, hybrid, or on-site audit. And I have it. I think we might be able to show it maybe on one of our YouTube channels. So visit the YouTube channel to check out the matrix. But it really does a good job of identifying the risk type and telling you what type of audit should be conducted.
Great. And now maybe can you expand upon that a little bit in terms of this concept of risk levels?
Yes. So, and Paul, we're talking about VDA 6.3 audits at this point.
Yeah, at this point.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting. I know in the beginning there was, with many organizations, a reluctance to move to remote auditing, particularly where manufacturing processes are concerned, which for VDA 6.3 and for IATF 16949 is all cases. So both VDA 6.3 and IATF 16949 focus on organizations that manufacture products. So I know lots of work has been done around, well, is there a way of almost developing a hybrid audit? And VDA did lots of work to, let's say, pioneer this, whereby the manufacturing bit was done on site, but the supporting activities were done remotely. And I think that's really, when we see these categories of a remote audit, a hybrid audit, or an on-site audit, that's what we're talking about. Where there is manufacturing, there tends that you would expect there to be an element of on-site audit. But as Devin mentioned, there's in the latest VDA 6.3, there is a section on remote audits and a categorization of risk. So is it a high risk, high product process risk, type 1? Type 2 would be medium product process risk, and then type 3 would be a low product process risk. And depending on which category, you would end up either being directed to an on-site audit, a hybrid audit, which is partly remote and partly on-site, and then for the type 3, the low risk, a remote audit. So a useful guide there that VDA have developed in VDA 6.3 to help organizations work out whether they need to be doing a full on-site audit or whether they can make it hybrid or fully remote.
Yeah, and maybe it would be good, in the IATF work group to consider this approach, that if this has now been a published, accepted approach of one of the most used process audit standards in the automotive industry, I think it would be really good for IATF to take the concept of this on board and maybe develop it further for the IATF scheme.
Yeah.
Devon, in terms of hybrid audits, then, can you explain a little bit more about, if we think about VDA 6.3, it covers really from the development into production and into customer service. Do you think some requirements lend themselves a little bit better to remote audit than others?
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, there's a table within VDA 6.3 2023 that shows which requirements are more suitable for remote audits, for example, like design and development, and which requirements are more suitable for on-site. For example, production, obviously, you want to be on-site for.
Yeah. So again, I think what VDA have done is very good. They've broken down from high, medium to low risk. And then if we say, okay, we're going to do a hybrid audit, they've then broken down from the chapters of P2 to P7 in VDA 6.3, which of those chapters and which questions within the chapters lend themselves to doing the audit on site, remote, or as part of a hybrid audit. So I think it's really, really good thinking. I know not everybody on the call will be experts in VDA 6.3, but I think there is some really good guidance in there about this. Now then, so we're talking about VDA 6.3. For the listeners then, can we make it clear? Is that an IATF requirement? Because we know it's recently changed.
Yeah, that's a good question, Paul. So I guess the quick answer is it's not an IATF requirement. So the IATF requirement is that organizations undertake manufacturing process audits. That's the IATF requirement. VDA 6.3 is a very good way of meeting that requirement, but it's not mandated that an IATF certified organization needs to use VDA 6.3. Personally, I would, and Paul, I think you probably share my view. It's a very effective way of auditing manufacturing processes. So it's which is why it's mentioned as in the annex of IATF 16949 as a possible way of undertaking manufacturing process audits. As always with all things IATF, the key is in the customer specific requirements. So if your customer requires you to use VDA 6.3, then that takes any sort of decision making out of your hands. If your customers don't require you to use VDA 6.3, then it becomes your choice as an organization on how you can get the most out of your manufacturing process audits. But certainly based on my knowledge and experience of VDA 6.3, it is an excellent approach to auditing manufacturing processes.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I guess an added thing now that organizations have to understand is not do we just have to use VDA 6.3, but which version do we have to use,
Yeah.
and when does the customer expect us to make the transition from the 2016 to the 2023 version? Because obviously there is no transition timetable because it isn't a
Yeah.
certification standard.
Yeah.
It's a process audit standard. So any of you that are supplying a customer that requires VDA 6.3, you should be confirming with the customer when they expect you to be moving to the 2023 version.
Yeah.
Um,
And Paul,
yeah.
large OEMs like VW, for example, will give information as well through to their supply chain in terms of timing expectations for implementation of the 2023 version.
Yeah. Good. So back to remote audits, Devon. Is there any indication on the IATF position about remote audits moving forward?
Right. So it's certainly a discussion point in the development group for Rule 6. Uh, Obviously, since COVID, we understand that, sales office or remote support locations might not be done in a building. It might be in someone's home office. So understanding that and going back and forth, there's a lot of discussion about allowing some type of remote audits to be done. But as we know, Rule 6 has not been finalized. So right now it's just discussion. It's not in writing anywhere. So
Yeah.
On a positive note, there is a section in the draft Rule 6 document called remote auditing. So that gives some hope that there will be some requirements around how and when to use remote auditing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still in draft form, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of sustainability and CO2 reduction, um, it would be great for IATF to try and say, okay, maybe we are going to try and reduce the amount of impact we have on the environment to support the scheme. So,
absolutely,
yeah, that would be good. And now for home-based workers, I know we've seen a lot of change in the way that the automotive industry is working, and a lot more people from home. How does the organization sort of consider that? And from a third-party audit perspective, what about these guys and girls that are working from their homes?
Yeah, that's again a good question, and one that is on the agenda at the Rule 6 meetings. I think, but as you say, many organisations have now much more flexible working policies as a result of COVID, where employees are not expected to be in work physically full time anymore. There is some flexibility, and I think it will be perfectly normal for those members of staff that are working remotely during an on-site audit. So the certification body are on site doing an audit, but there are people that are working remotely, again in line with their terms and conditions. I would see those people being brought into the audit remotely from the site, if that makes sense. So the CB auditors on site doing the audit, and they would bring in those remote workers. Again, it always gets a bit confusing this because we're not necessarily talking about working in remote support locations.
Yeah.
These are people that would normally, their place of work is the site that is being audited, but they're working from home. So they could be brought in remotely, would be my view. But hopefully Rule 6 will make that clear eventually.
Yeah. So I guess concluding this part of the discussion, the listeners like stability and they don't like change are probably not going to be very happy in the next couple of years, because obviously we are going to see changes. We are going to see Rule 6 edition, which we will keep you up to date as listeners with. We'll also keep you up to date in the progress of the revision of ISO 9001. And if IATF make the decision to revise IATF, we'll obviously keep you up to date with that revision process. But I have to say at the moment, a lot of it is watch this space. Nothing that we've covered is by any means in a tablet of stone, and things could change. So the point of these podcasts is to keep you up to date with change and with development. So let's move on then. Since we did the last podcast, we've got a couple of questions that have been raised at the YouTube channel. The first relates to IATF audit checklists and their use. So Devon, what's the IATF view about checklists?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So obviously, IATF is focused on the process approach, and it has been since early 2000s, I think 2002. For new auditors, they may feel more comfortable to develop questions for audit trails using the pre-audit information, taking into account any risk that they identify by reviewing performance data or other related information. But the use of fixed checklists is not aligned with the process approach within IATF.
Good. Yeah, no, that was certainly my view, and it's good to hear you reflecting that yeah, it really isn't aligned with what automotive call the automotive process approach by having, I think the key word is fixed checklists. I think people can write down questions, but they should be driven by the process and the performance. No, the next one then, another comment from YouTube. A subscriber stated after watching the video related to error proofing, and this is the exact word of the feedback, the auditor seemed he had no idea about how the system actually worked. What do you think about this comment?
Now that is an interesting point. This may or may not come across in the YouTube videos, Paul, but often we're not actually we're acting, aren't we? Let's be honest. We're trying to create an audit-like environment in a factory to try and help give tips and hints and tips to our audience. But if we go back to the sort of basic requirements for an auditor to undertake an effective audit, they have to have a sort of minimum level of technical experience. They have to meet a required level of technical experience. And if we take internal audits, for example, we've got the requirement 7.2.3 along with its sanctioned interpretations that states at a minimum, manufacturing process auditors shall demonstrate technical understanding of the relevant manufacturing processes. So again, it's difficult to know exactly which YouTube video this was, but I'm guessing it was a manufacturing process. So let's use that example of an internal auditor auditing a manufacturing process. IATF would require them to have a technical understanding of the process. And again, as per the IATF requirement 7.2.3, including the sanction interpretation, an organisation would need to keep a record on how this competency requirement is achieved. And as I sort of mentioned at the beginning, do remember the videos are only simulations. I'm to be fair, I'm normally the poor auditor, aren't I? But I think in this case, you were the auditor, Paul. But correct me if I'm wrong. But
yeah, I think I was.
You are. No one would question your technical competency. So yeah.
Good. Yeah. No, thank you, Niall. But yeah, an interesting point that auditors. And I guess this would apply to internal audit, second party audit, and third party audit. There are requirements about auditors having the adequate technical understanding of the processes and the sector of the automotive industry that they're auditing.
And actually, Paul, that just takes us back and links us back to VDA 6.3, which again, a manufacturing process audit methodology puts at its heart the sort of competency of the auditor to be able to go and audit a manufacturing process. They need to have that competency to understand the process that they're auditing.
Yeah. Good. No, thank you, Niall. And I think this is the last question, Devon. So obviously a lot of people listening to these podcasts are also subscribers for the IOB SMMT YouTube channel. What plans are in place for the next series?
Yeah, so we get to come together soon here. We're going to start filming on site on the 8th of September at a supplier over in the UK. And then we continue the series on competency criteria defined in the IATF audit guide during that. So we should film on the 8th of September, and then I believe they're scheduled to be released sometime towards the end of November.
Yeah. Good. No, very much looking forward to that. And the listeners to this podcast, if you do have ideas on what you think would be good to cover, then we are flexible.
Or if your facility wants to have us.
Yeah, or if we have companies anywhere around the world that maybe later in 2023 or in 2024 would be happy to host us, then we would be delighted. We really do want to visit different cultures, different sectors of the automotive industry. So please, if there's any ideas about what you would like us to cover, or if you would like to invite us to your plant, then we would be very happy.
And Paul, just quickly to get in any question, any Q&A kind of stuff as well. So I never know how the easiest way of doing this is, but we are always very keen to hear from people in terms of comments and questions so that we can almost use this and subsequent YouTube videos to kind of respond and answer any of those Q&As. So have Q&A sessions. So we do like to get comments and questions from people via YouTube, I guess, is the easiest way of doing that.
Yeah. Okay, so once again, Devon and Niall, thanks very much for your input to this podcast. Please keep listening and please keep watching the SMMT IOB YouTube channel, and don't forget to subscribe. So we look forward to talking with you in the near future. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Niall. We'll be in touch.
The IATF 16949 podcast, where we talk about all things automotive. Find us on our channel at youtube.com/IATF 16949 auditing, or visit our website at www.iatfglobaloversight.org. This is the IATF 16949 podcast.